We have an interesting thing today, interesting shir today. Today we're going to speak about the Or Shel Mashiach, the light of the Mashiach. And that's a very mysterious term, the light of Mashiach. And it is an enormously powerful thing. I will try and explain to you to what extent I understand what the light of Mashiach is. It is a very, very deep thing. Obviously, it's a very unique light that belongs exclusively to Mashiach. But there are things that we can all understand about it. And to really go into the full aspects of that light would take us quite a while, of some of the aspects of that light. And maybe I can give you some kind of a glimpse, to some extent, of what that light will be, in some ways, what that looks like, and so on. But the final light, that really light, when it does appear, is awesome. Because that light is the full power of the Shekhinah manifest, the full power. And it is an extraordinary power. What do we mean by the light of the Mashiach? What do we mean by that? What does the Mashiach have to do with the light, really? What does that mean? Well, in davening it says there by the Rei Tzedakah, it says, O Chodosh al Tzion To'ir. A new light, O Chodosh, a new light will shine on Zion. And let us all be worthy, the meheru lo'iro, quickly to that light. So it says it's an Or Chodesh. What is that Or Chodesh? That Or Chodesh is the light of Mashiach. That's what the Or Chodesh is. It's referring to what's called the Orei Shel Mashiach. There's some amazing medrashim on that, really beautiful medrashim. Yafet Shimoni and Yeshaya has a whole bunch of medrashim on the concept of the light of Mashiach. Especially with respect to the Mashiach ben Yosef, who is the main bearer of this light as far as the Geula is concerned. Mashiach ben David is the bearer of this light only after the Geula has happened, and as far as the later years, the Messianic years. But the initial introduction of that light and its expansion to all Klal Yisrael is essentially the main purpose of Mashiach ben Yosef. And there was a medrash that says, and of course these are all interesting metaphors, but the medrash says that the Satan, who was of course the angel who was responsible for the Yetzer Hara, and the accusing angel, and the Malach HaMovet, all in one, he once went to the Banishim and he said to him, that light which you have by your kisei, by your throne, what is that light? So the Banishim says, this is the light, this is the light of the Mashiach. So the Sultan said, instant conversation, the Sultan said, can you show me this light? Let me see this light a little bit, let's get a little taste of what this light is. So the Banishim said to him, okay, I will give you a glimpse of it. And the Banishim revealed a slight glimpse of that light to the Sultan. And when it says in the message that when the Sultan saw that light, he trembled and shook because he was terrified, because he saw that light would be his end. He saw the power of that light was so enormous that he will not survive it, nor the nations of the world. You see, I mean, he trembled, he sitted. It's not easy to make him sit up, to him tremble, The Malach HaMovet makes everybody else sit up. But for him, because the light of the Mashiach, of the Or Mashiach, the light of that of the Mashiach ben Yosef specifically, is the death of what's called the Zom of the Nachash, or the dominion of the Satan in the world. The light itself directs itself against two aspects of the Satan, and this is very, very important. And one of the very things which distinguishes ranked amateurs in Ashkafa from real professionals, if I may use the term, is the true understanding of the nature of the Satan. When Adam was first made, and very important to listen very carefully on this, when Adam was first made, the Buddhism says, I want to give you Olam Haba by virtue of your own effort. And we explained that the difficulty with Adam Rishon had was that the Neshama is unable to receive the light of the Shekhinah, or what the Banishim wants to give it, without producing or doing something to contribute to it. The Neshama cannot take the light of what the Banishim wants to give it, it has to earn it. Right. That is called Namad Ksufa. I think I mentioned this, Namad Ksufa, which is an Aramaic term which means bread of shame, and it's the same thing as if you give a poor person, a poor man, tzedakah, he recoils with it because it's a dishonor to him, it's offensive to him, it's like an insult. A person feels the key point is that a person feels a drop in self-esteem if he's forced to take something, or he's given the opportunity to take something and he hasn't in any way really earned it. He feels taking something for free is a drop in self-esteem. I don't want to go into the origins of Na'am Sufa or what it really means. This is very deep, and we have advanced shum that will go into this. You see, extraordinarily deep what that is. But the point is, Na'am Sufa is a problem for the neshama. It is a problem. It is a structural problem for the neshama. It comes right out of the inner guts of a neshama, that the neshama says to the neshama, no, I don't want your olam haba unless I in some way have done something for it. Wait. What Nama means bread, Sufa means shame. It means bread of shame. It's the inability of someone to take something for nothing. That's why it's called bread of shame. If you give a poor man bread, they'll be ashamed. Okay. The presence of Nama Sufa requires of the Baruch Hashem Kaviyachol that he create a situation where a person earns his olam haba. Okay? That choosing situation means that the person is given an option, a choice, to either choose olam haba or choose olam hazeh, which is the option. Olam hazeh is, in essence, the Yetzer Hara. It is the seduction of the physical world. That is the Yetzer Hara. Okay, now, the ability, listen carefully, the ability of the Satan to seduce. Where does the Satan have this ability to seduce? Where did he get this from? Why do we have Yetzer Haras? What is the origin and essence of the Yetzer Hara? The essence of the Yetzer Hara lies in the fact that we are physical beings. Thus the essence of the Yetzer Hara comes from the guf. The Satan is not in the guf, but his power has to do with the existence of physicality. That's where the Yetzer comes from, okay? So Na'am Sufa creates something called a Yetzer Hara. Okay? That's what it is. Yetzer is the answer to Na'am Sufa. Now, if man destroys his Yetzer Hara, if man destroys his Yetzer Hara by not listening to it, then he resolves the problem of Na'am Sufa. Because he will have earned his Olam Haba. So the Yetzer Hara is there to provoke you, to test you, so that you eradicate your problem of Na'am Sufa. So the first thing, or the first barrier to Gilui Yechudoi, or the awareness of the Baruch Hashem, the light that comes from the Baruch Hashem, the Shekhinah, is the Yetzer Hara. It's the Yetzer Hara and the presence of physicality that has produced a world which is incomplete, a world of the Thorn. Now, if you do a chait and you listen to the Yetzer Hara, something else happens. The Yetzer Hara suddenly expands and is converted into a dark, evil force that suddenly surrounds your neshama, enters into your guf, and is responsible for all the pain and difficulties that we have in the world. Okay. The presence of the Yetzer in the world is called Nachash. Nachash means a serpent. And of course we know why it's called Nachash, because the first manifestation of the Yetzer in the world was a Nachash. The Nachash went at Eve, Chava. And that's why it's called the Nachash HaKadmoni, the first Nachash. But basically, the word Nachash stands for the concept of the Yetzer, which is the seductive power. It says, hey, come, follow me. That's power in every person, which attempts to drive it to do bad, or to go against the Baruch Hashem and distance himself from the Baruch Hashem, is called the Yetzer, but in Hashkafa it's referred to as the power of the Nachash. If a person has listened to that Yetzer Hara, if he's listened, then what happens is he then expands that Nachash, so that it's called the Zohama of the Nachash. The Zohama shel Nachash, or Zohama. That is the concept of kilkul. Kilkul means damage. The person, by listening to the Yetzer Hara, brings the Nachash into himself, and by doing so he damages his own state of being, his body, his soul, and the life which he's supposed to have. That's called kilkul. Now when the Sultan saw the light that the Baruch Hashem had to give, that messianic light, he became trembled because he realized that that messianic light was an antidote to both aspects of the Sultan. The Satan in its potential state, in its seductive force, is called the Yitzhar or the Nachash. But the Satan in his successful state, in his accomplished state, in his ability to literally dominate reality and change the face of the world, is called the Zorm of the Nachash. And Chazal, the Gemara says very interesting, that when Chava listened to the Nachash, it says there, the famous statement in Chazal, Hitul bo Zoyama, the Nachash projected an impurity into her. And that impurity is a force of tumah, or darkness, which then goes into the world. When the Sultan saw the light of Mashiach, he realized that that light was an antidote to both aspects. It's an antidote to his actual power, and it's an antidote to his potential power. That light of the Mashiach is possessed by the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David. But remember, we said that the Mashiach ben Yosef is essentially associated with the process of tahara, or purification. What does he have to purify? The Mashiach ben Yosef has to remove the damage that the Sultan did. You see, that's what he has to remove. He has to remove the damage, or the kilkel, to a process called tahara, which means that the Mashiach ben Yosef combats the Zorm of the Nachash. So he uses the light of the Mashiach, or his light, to destroy the Zorma. Once that's destroyed, we have to go to the second stage, which then is the use of the light of Mashiach by the Mashiach ben David. And then he destroys the Yitzhar itself, or Nachash. You see, once he does that, by destroying the Yitzhar, he destroys physicality, which is the root of the Yitzhar. And that's the essence of Zichur HaGuf, or the transformation of the body. You remember we said that if Adam had not sinned, then the entire body would have become transformed? How? How would Adam have transformed into a body that suddenly becomes spiritual? How? Because remember, by not listening to his Yitzhar, he destroys that force. But that force is identical with the physical world. Hence, by Adam Rishon not listening to his Yitzhar, he destroys the physical world. Meaning, he elevates it to a spiritual world. Therefore, the removal of the Nachash, or the Yitzhar, is the removal of the physical world as we know it, and the elevation of the world to a level of shleimus, and that's called Olam Haba. Olam Haba, therefore, is nothing more than a state of existence, or a level of awareness or consciousness of God, which has no Nachash in it, and surely no Zorm of Nachash. Both of these tasks are accomplished by the two Mashiachs. And both of these Mashiach use that what's called as the light of the Mashiach. This is extremely, very difficult for most people to understand. That, there are two different concepts. There's something called the Nachash, and there's something called the Zoyam the Nachash. And I can sit in for days drawing further distinctions out of that. But the entire world rests on these two principles. Which, now the word Nachash, if you count up the gematria of the word Nachash, okay? If you count up Nachash, Nachash is the essence of the Yitzhar, because that's the Yitzhar in its original, primordial form. Okay, if you count up the gematria, the letters, you will have Shin is 358. Okay? What word equals 358? Well, look at the word Mashiach. 358. Because Mashiach is the antidote to the Nachash. That's why the Mashiach is also called the Nachash HaKodesh, the holy serpent. So the Baruch sends the holy serpent against the Nachash itself, because that is the Mashiach. You have to understand one thing. When Adam Rishon was first created, and the Baruch says, fight your Yetzer Hara, and by fighting your Yetzer Hara, destroy physicality, and destroy the barriers between you and me. That's what the Baruch said. So the Baruch says, you therefore have the power of Mashiach, because Adam was the first Mashiach. And if you would have done it, the Baruch says, if you do it, you will destroy Olam Hazeh. And you will instantly create Olam Haba, because you will liquidate the imperfection in the world. That's why you are Mashiach. You, Adam Rishon, are the antidote to the Nachash. The Nachash is not your enemy in the sense that he's alien from you. The Nachash, listen carefully, is you. It is you from the other side. And this is the deepest concept of all. Who is the Satan? The Satan is your Nam Ksufa. It's your problem of Nam Ksufa made alive that turns around to you and says, here I am you, but I'm the bad part of you. I'm the problem which is in you. You see, get rid of me. That's the essence of the Satan. The Satan is your reflection. It's a reflection of you. That's why the Baruch Shem says, not that you go destroy the spiritual force. The Baruch Shem says, destroy that other part of you, which is giving you problems, and which won't allow you to accept Olam Haba from me. So I'm going to make that into a special force. And as a special force, it's going to cause you problems. But if you deny that force, you will be denying the original problem of Nam Sufa. And therefore you will be elevating your soul without Nam Sufa. Hence you will create your own Olam Haba. Very, very important, you see. Strange. There will come a time when people will understand this much clearer than I'm saying this, because people will feel it. There will come a day when people will no longer be troubled by the Yetzer Hara as we know it, but when they feel the Yetzer Hara, they will feel the origin of the Yetzer Hara, and they will feel and they will understand that the Yetzer Hara is connected to them. It's not an alien force which was given to them outside. It is them from the imperfect side. And when they feel the Yetzer Hara, they're going to feel the part of them which is not clear and not perfect. And they're going to realize that the Baruch Shem never made a Yetzer Hara in a real fact. But the Baruch Shem simply says, I want you to get rid of your problem, which is part of your Kedusha. And that's why Adam is Mashiach. That's why the man, a human being, is a Mashiach, you see. Because the essence of Mashiach is the liquidation of the problem of Namak Sufa. That's why the first man was the Mashiach. You see. And that's why all of us, in a sense, have a piece of the Mashiach. Because anyone who has the Yetzer Hara is automatically also a Mashiach. Anyone who has a Nachash, anyone who has the problem of Namak Sufa is a Mashiach. Because he is the cure of his own problem. He is his own doctor. And therefore the person can make claim to his own Olam Haba. You see. So the picture changes vastly from what you normally see in when you read. We normally think that a person has a Yetzer Hara, and he has to come back to Yetzer Hara, and as a reward, the Baruch Shem sends Olam Haba. That's the truth, is that is a childlike view of it. That is the current view, which is not unfortunately taught in the adult. But it's really a childish view, because it's much deeper what it is. The Baruch Shem says to the person, cure yourself, and I'm going to make your disease into a real seductive force. So by denying your own part, you will liquidate it, and suddenly have no problems when it comes to appreciating who I am. That's what it's all about. That's why Mashiach equals Nachash. But when Adam sinned, he did something disastrous. He expanded that Nam Sufa. He made it worse. Instead of getting rid of it, he made it much worse. So if there was a barrier between him and God before, there was a wall between him and God now. Before it was Mechita, now it's a Kosel. Before it was simply a what? A simply barrier. You see, now it's a wall, it's a brick wall, it's an iron wall that exists between us and Baruch Shem. And that iron wall is called the Zohar L'Nachash. And the light, simple screen is called the Nachash. You see, and that's basically what you're seeing here. So when Adam sinned, he twisted the concept of Mashiach. So now he's got to deal with the Zohar, a much worse situation. That calls for the split in Mashiach into two parts. One part that now will deal with the new barrier, and the old part that will deal with the old barrier. And those two parts are called the two Mashiachs. So that each of us have two pieces of Mashiach in us. There are aspects of us that have to deal with the Zohar we created, and there are aspects of us that still have to deal with the ultimate Yetzer Hara, which somehow still didn't expand. And that was basically given to all people, and Zikr Klal Yisrael. So therefore every Jew is a shtick or a piece of Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Then who is the Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David? The Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David are two individuals who will simply come and finish off the job that all the Jews have been doing for the last couple of thousand years. That's all. They are master technicians. They are total professionals, you see. And what it is they will simply come to all the Jews who have already done a great deal of work in the Tahara of the Kilkul of the Zohar Nachash, and the Mashiach ben Yosef comes and says, here I am. I'm going to finalize this for you. You see, you've all done a marvelous job, but I'm going to finish it now and finish the process. And he's a master professional, and his weapon is that light. And then after he finishes that, and the Zohar is gone, and all that's left is Nachash, then the Mashiach ben David comes and says, now I will do the last and the rest, and I will liquidate the final manifestation of Nachash in you. And once I do that, that is the demise or the end of the physical world. That's why right after the Mashiach ben David comes Olam Haba. That's why one follows right after the other. And that's the reason for the sequence. First Mashiach ben Yosef to finish the job of the Tahara, then Mashiach ben David to finish the job of the removal of the Nachash, or the Yitzhara, and physicality. And then, the highest level, Olam Haba. There are four people who never died. The Medrash says, and that will be Eliyahu Navi, Serach Pasasha, Chanoich, and Yonah. It's Yonah. But the fact of the matter is that Yonah is a very strange person, Yonah. You know, Yonah and the whale, Yonah with the of course with the dog, and so on. And what I've seen was that Yonah was a child who Elisha resurrected from the dead. So somehow he did die, apparently, when he was a small child, and Elisha brought him back. But he never died the second time around. Apparently what happened because of the tsar, because of the distress that he had by being in the whale. In that way, the Buddha spared him from the pangs of death. When I mean spared him, he achieved the tahara of the group without having to die. But this thing about Yonah is more mysterious, because Yonah was the neshama of Mashiach ben Yosef. And the Ramchal, the Mashiach says, is that if you look in the Sefer of Yonah, you'll see that when Yonah was inside the whale, he was davening to the Buddha to be freed. There's a certain tefillah or prayer that Yonah said. What the Mashiach said is that prayer contains the mysteries of the Mashiach ben Yosef. In the Klippas, the Mashiach ben Yosef, who lives in the netherworld, on the deepest Zorma, you see, that tefillah contains that state, and we will discuss about this concept of Mashiach ben Yosef in the Klippas. Very, very awesome, mysterious thing. Yes. Well, the thing is, I don't know how these four transcended the death process, because basically, once the Adam Rishon sinned, and the Zoma went into the body, the only way to get out of it is that the body has to decompose, and by decomposing, then the Zoma goes out. That's what death is about. Death is not a punishment. Death is simply an alternative route to get rid of the Zoma. Death is the Tahara of the body. That's what death is. So, how is it possible for these people to go up into the Shemayim without dying? I don't know, because even Moshe Rabbeinu had to die. So, I don't know. Now, there are a number of people... Wait. There are a number of people who... Now, the truth of the matter is, these four are mentioned in the Medrash, but I saw in the Masechta Derech Eretz, another one of the small minor tractates, they call them, where there's a Brisa, it says there that there are 9 people who died, and it names several others, but it names also the Mashiach will never die. He will not be subject to Misa. So it names also the Mashiach will never be subject to death also. Let's go on. Now that we have an understanding of what the objective is of all Mashiach, what is the all Mashiach? Really? Okay. In order to understand that, let's go back in time to the time of Moshe Rabbeinu and the time of Matan Torah. Okay? Now basically what happened was, the Gula Rishonim was supposed to be the Gula Acharona. The first Gula was supposed to be the last Gula. The Buddhism had no intention to continue it after that. And the Talmud makes it very clear that the first Gula should have been the last. But because the Jews did the thing with the Egel, they spoiled it. Okay, now I'm not going to go into the whole thing of the Egel and so on. We went into that before, how that spoiled it and what that was. But basically this is the thing. Now, when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the heavens, the Shemayim, to bring down the Torah, we mentioned last week that the Torah by that time had already distributed itself in 613 facets. If you remember, it was already a Torah of 613 mitzvahs. It was no longer a Torah of 7 mitzvahs or 1 mitzvah. It was a Torah of 613 mitzvahs. What does that mean? That means that the neshama with the 613 parts now needed a specific tikkun or correction to each part individually through its own bridge. As I mentioned last week, the people who used to live before Moshe Rabbeinu were very high, higher than the people who lived in Klal Yisrael. Because their neshamas were such that even though the neshama structurally had 613 parts, but to correct those 630 parts and to remove the nam, the ksufa, which is associated with each one of these parts, you can do through 7 bridges. Through 7 different aspects of activity or experiences, you can do what? You can fix up all 613 little nam, the ksufas. Okay? Those are the 7 mitzvahs. But by the time the Jews had reached Har Sinai, or actually since Avram, those 613 structural aspects of the neshama, with the 613 different aspects of Nam Nesufa, now had to be corrected by 613 bridges. And that was the 613 mitzvahs. And the Torah then finally had come to its lowest form, in a sense, in terms of its, or rather the Torah and the Neshamas had come down to their lowest form, where suddenly everything was in terms of its small, minute particles. Now, that was fine. So Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the Shemayim, and the Baruch Shem says, I want to give you the Torah. I want to give you a Torah of Taryag mitzvahs, of 650 mitzvahs. Fine. And remember, this is before Chal Yisrael did the Chet of the Egel. We are talking about prior to the Chet of the Egel. Let's look at what Moshe was supposed to bring down. Moshe said, fine, let me have it. And what the Baruch Shem said, I am going to give you a Torah which is very unique and very different. That even though it is true that it is at the end of the phase, because it's now into 613 aspects, but don't think it is the lowest phase, because the Torah that I'm about to give you is different than the Torah I have ever given to the world. In fact, I have never given this Torah to anyone before. What is that? When you open up a Chumash, and you look inside it, and you start to read it, okay? And let's say you understand perfect Hebrew, okay? And you really do it well, you understand it. And you read the entire thing, the Sefer. Do you see in that Torah any evidence that God exists? Or does that Torah give you an understanding, really, about why things happen, and how God is Mashiach in the world? Do you see it so clearly from that Torah that it constitutes absolute truth? No, obviously not. If it did, then everybody would be, what? A Maimon. Everyone would believe in the Baruch Shem. And not only believe in him, would know that he exists. You see, everyone. Which means that the Torah, which is what? The Torah, which is the light of the Baruch Shem, the light of the Shekhinah, is faced with a very unusual problem. There's something wrong. When you look at the Torah, you are looking at the light of the Shekhinah in the form of words. Yet when you read those words, there's no evidence that the Shekhinah exists. That doesn't make sense. How is it possible for us to read the light of the Shekhinah, and yet the Shekhinah to be concealed from us, so that we can go off and deny the entire thing? What is that? You see the problem? That is our problem. But when the Baruch Shem wanted to give the light of the Shekhinah in the form of the Torah to Moshe, it had no such darkness. Because the Torah that was supposed to be handed to Moshe Rabbeinu the first time was a Torah which was the light of the Shekhinah in the form when the Shekhinah was clear in front of you. So all you had to do was learn it, and instantly, with absolute certainty, you would understand the existence of the Baruch Shem and feel and understand the entire Hashgacha, just as you are seeing me in front of you. Better than that. You will be more certain of the existence of God than you are of the existence of me. That is the Torah in its real form. Strange. We never think of the Torah that way, because we're so accustomed to the Torah that we have. We're so accustomed to people saying, I believe in Torah. I don't believe in Torah. Some man wrote it. It was changed over time. Okay, the Baruch Shem wrote it. Maybe maybe not. I'll do the best I can. That's it. We see constant doubts. We see denials. That's all we see when it comes to the Torah. You see. Or we see possible affirmations. We don't see any certainty. We don't see any absolute qualities. But the truth of the matter is that the Torah is is the word of the Shekhinah. Then it has to show it. Why doesn't it show it? It doesn't show it because we have lost that light. But the Torah in its original light, in its original words, and its original form, showed it entirely, so that when Moshe brought this Torah down on the tablet, the Torah that he was bringing down was the Torah that showed the total existence of God, without a doubt, so that anyone who looked in would instantly understand it. Where is this light, and what is this light? This is a staggering light, you see. It's a staggering Torah. You see, what light was that? That was the light that Adam Rishon originally had but lost. That's called the hidden light, or the argonas. What happened was that Adam Rishon, in his learning, attempted to find that light, but didn't do it. He didn't accomplish it. The Baruch Shem hid it. The Baruch Shem hid it and never gave it to anyone. He wanted to give it to Adam. But that hidden light of the Shekhinah, where the Shekhinah shows itself without question, where there's what's called a Gilu Yichudai, where the oneness of God is clear with absolute certainty, was never given to Adam. He would have gotten it if the Nachash would have been destroyed. Because the barrier to that Torah and us is the Nachash. It is the Nachash which masks the Shekhinah, so that when the light comes down, we don't see the light of the Sheen in those words. So the Buddhism said, get rid of the Nachash. By getting rid of the Nachash, you get rid of the lens, the filter over that light. And that light is yours with its entire purity. That is the light of Olam Haba. That's the Torah in Olam Haba, so to speak. But the Torah as it was presented in Olam Hazeh is a different Torah. It's a Torah with the Nachash on top of it. When Adam sinned, he added another barrier. So there's a double filter on the light. And the second filter is called the Zom of the Nachash. So that the first filter called Nachash, which the Bonisham did, as a result of the Nahamas too for the problem, is the first filter. So right away it's already darker. Adam Rishon is not so sure anymore whether or not he wants to listen to the Bonisham. That's the Yetzer Hara. And then the second filter is the sin of Adam, blocking out the rest of it. So Adam is not only at this point, well not Adam, but his children and his descendants are not only concerned whether or not what they want to listen to Bonisham, but they don't even know if God exists anymore. That second filter is the Zom of the Nachash. And that's the effect of the Zomah and of the Nachash. The most profound effect that the Nachash has and the Zomah has is to conceal the light of the Shekhinah. But since the light of the Shekhinah is the Torah, in effect it controls or modifies the format of the Torah which is revealed to us. So that the Torah which is revealed to us at any point in time is an exact reflection of where we are holding in terms of how much Nachash and Zomah of Nachash we have in us. You see, therefore, when Moshe went up to the Bonisham and the Bonisham says, I'm going to give you a new Torah, the Bonisham was referring to the Oragoners. I'm going to remove the Kilkul filter, and also I'm going to remove the Nachash filter to a very large degree, so that that filter which is left only has a slight amount of impediment. And I say to you, give it as the last of it, but I will absorb most of it. So the light that he wanted to give to Moshe, that Torah that he wanted to give Moshe, was the Oragoners, and that is the Or of Mashiach. The Or of the Mashiach is the light of the Sheen in its full blast, or almost in its full blast, so that whatever way it manifests itself, in whatever mitzvah or whatever Torah manifests itself, it is fundamentally totally clear. Now you see why when the Yetzer Hara saw that, when the Sultan saw that, he shivered, because he realized there's no defense against that light, because he realized that that light, the power of that light, meant that he was gone. Because he understood that he is the barrier to it. He is the one that makes that light obscure. And when he saw the light powerful, he realized, wait a minute, where am I? I no longer serve as a barrier. So he realized that that light, or the brightness of the light, the truth which is contained in the light, is a reflection or is evidence of his demise, or his diminution. You see the logic? That's what he understood, and he was shocked, and he was terrified, because he realized that there would come a day when he will lose control. And he will no longer be able to what? Usurp the light to himself and block it from the neshamas of man, specifically the neshamas of Klal Yisrael. And that was a terrible, terrible thing. This light is called the Orish Mashiach. It is also referred to as the Or HaGonus. The Or HaGonus means the hidden light. Gonus means hidden. Okay? The Or HaGonus. It's also referred to Orish Mashiach, and it's also referred in its technical terms, you see, in a real technical term, which is called the Torah B'Surat HaKeter, the Torah in the form of the crown. The Torah in the form of the crown. Why is it called the Torah in the form of the crown? Because the crown is obvious. The Keter, which is the Malchus of the Bonishim, is totally obvious. Do you ever wonder what the Mashiach is going to do? Do you have an idea, or can you begin to understand what the Mashiach is going to do when he arrives? You can have no idea, because we've never seen this type of a light. Never. We cannot even begin to understand the power and the awesomeness of this kind of light. Look, it says what the Mashiach is going to do. It says that when the Mashiach arrives, Umolo ha'oretz ezeyot Hashem, and the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Bonisham, k'mayim liyom l'chasem, as the waters cover the sea. Look at that pasuk. It says that the entire world, every man will be aware of the Bonisham, and know of his existence, and know of the way that he operates, understand the way, the meisim of the Bonisham, the way he operates, with such clarity, and it will be such prevalent, like the waters cover the sea. How is it possible? How is it possible to go to mankind, go to communist Russia, go to the Khomeini, you see, and go to all the Rishonim that exist, and all the Christians, and all the Buddhists, and everything, and convince them of the existence of God, and that they're all wrong? Who has such absolute information? Who? In all of history, no one has ever had that. Not even Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to convince many of the nations of the world. Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to convince the Egyptians. Was he? Not really. They ran after him. Whatever the stories, there are questions if he had Bechira, power, didn't have Bechira, whatever the stories. But fundamentally, Moshe really failed to really draw the Egyptian people with him. He didn't convince anyone else, even Amalek wanted to kill the Jews, and Moab and all of them. You see, whatever the stories, basically Moshe did not have the power, really, to do that. You see. But the Mashiach will have that power. How? Because the Mashiach will have a Torah in the form, when anyone who looks at it, from a child to an old person, will know that there's not a question that the Baruch Shem is the Melech. You see. Bayom Ahu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. In that day of the arrival of Mashiach, there will be one God, that the entire world will know that. V'olu Moshiach and the Moshiach, that's what it says. V'olu Moshiach, and the Saviors, plural. It says Moshiach. What do you mean Saviors? It says, and the Saviors, the Redeemers, will go up on the Mount of Zion. You see, Lishkoit is Ha'esav, and they will judge the mountain of Esav, which is the Goyim, especially the Christians was the Goyim. You see, V'holisol Hashem HaMelucha, and then the Baruch Shem will what? Will have the Malchus. What is Malchus of the Baruch Shem? What does it mean V'holisol Hashem HaMelucha? God will then be king. That's what it means. God will be king. Which means it? God will be king. It's not that God is not king now, but God will be king. We will all know that He's king. It will be clear and obvious, even to Esav, that the Baruch Shem is Melech, without a question. Why does it say V'olu Moshiach? Why does it say plural? No? Because there are two Moshiach, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. There you see hinted to the fact that it takes two Mashiachs to bring that light. Each one having one against the Zoma and one against the Nachash. So that the Malchus of the Baruch Shem is a fate, is an accomplishment on the basis of both Mashiachs. But that's what it is. It is the Torah B'Surat HaKeser. It is the Torah in the format of what? Of the crown. Where the Malchus of the Baruch Shem is clear. That's what it is. That's the light of Mashiach. And that's how he can do it. That's where he has his power from. Not because he's magical in some way, or he's a supernatural figure. This is bunk. Very simple. He has the right equipment. He has the right armament. It says in the Potik, also, what does it say? It says, Lo b'choyo, v'lo b'koyach. The Geula, the redemption, will not come what? With military, with soldiers and armies. V'lo b'koyach, and not with might. Kim beruchi, but with my spirit. That's what the Baruch Shem says. You know how the Geula is going to come? You know what the power of the Mashiach will be? Not tanks, not conventional weapons, and not nuclear weapons. But my spirit, ruchi. When ruchi? The Mashiach will have the power of absolute truth. Now, we don't know what that power is because no one has ever had that power since the beginning of creation. Could you realize what the power of absolute truth is? It's awesome. It is someone who, when he says something, you know it is 100% true. Such truth doesn't exist with everyone. Maybe true, maybe 80% is true. But 100% true? Such a Matthias exists? Yes. And that Matthias is the Matthias of that light. Now what happens? When Klal Yisrael did the sin of the Egel, you see, that light got a new Zohar filter called the Chet of the Egel. The sin of the Egel produced a new Zohar filter and suddenly destroyed that incredible beauty that should have been seen and what the Torah really should have looked like and put it into the darkness. And you know what the Baruch Shem says? The Baruch Shem says, what happened? Look at the light that I gave you. It's terrible. So the Baruch Shem says, I must then destroy Klal Yisrael. Because the Torah that I gave you a Torah of 613 facets. And it is my intention that such a Torah must be the Torah B'Surat HaKeser. It must be. You see, I can't, with this new sin of the Egel, they have destroyed the Torah B'Tzuz HaKeser. Until it became a Torah B'Tzuz HaKeser, you want to do Chatoim? Okay, do it. But once the Baruch Hashem already revealed the Torah B'Tzuz HaKeser, this crown, absolute truth light, it could not suffice, it couldn't suffer another filter. So that's why the Baruch Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we must destroy Klal Yisrael and start all over again from you. Because once the Torah entered into its form of 613, it was the purest form of all, and it could not suffer another reduction. So Moshe did something which was absolutely staggering. And you realize why we always say this parsha on the kindness. You see, when Moshe says, what? Vayecha Moshe, and that he says, and he asked the Hashem to be menachem, to withdraw against the evil that he wanted to do to his nation. The Moshe Rabbeinu begged the Hashem to go back. You see, what he begged the Hashem is not to spare Klal Yisrael. That's the simple way of looking at it. That he begged the Hashem, please don't destroy the Jews, you know? And the Hashem says, don't worry about it, I'm making you a new nation. And Moshe Rabbeinu turned around his own Yetzer Hara, because it's a very big temptation. A new nation from him. He would become an Ov like Avram Yaakov. And what he didn't do it, and he said, I refuse, spare Klal Yisrael. But you have to understand what really went on. It wasn't a question of the life or death of the Jews. It was a question of what happened to the Torah. The Jews who left Egypt were connected to a Torah B'Tzuz HaKeser. If they sinned, then this Torah is no longer viable. If it is no longer viable, they are no longer viable. Which means that when Moshe Rabbeinu dived into the Baruch Hashem, he asked the Baruch Hashem to do something that has never been done. To take a Torah, which is the light of the Mashiach itself, you see, and allow it to live in a filter of Zoma that has never existed. Because either that light was up there or it came down. You see, one way or the other. Either the light had never come down, or once it came down to the pure light. But that light should come down and exist in what? In a Tumah was unknown, it was inconceivable in the Hashgacha. So what Moshe was asking the Baruch Hashem was not to spare the Jews, but to spare them because by allowing this Torah to survive in a Klippa, in a Tumah. And if that's what happened, then the Jews could survive. And Moshe won, because the Baruch Hashem says, I will do. Solachti kidvoracha, I will what? I will forgive Klal Yisrael, as you have asked me. Because you have asked me something which is incredibly unique. It's a new Hashgacha. What Moshe Rabbeinu did was to compel, in a sense, to convince rather the Baruch Hashem to alter the Hashgacha itself. Because there never existed a Hashgacha which would allow this kind of Torah to be in such a klippa with a new filter. So what the Baruch Hashem had to alter his very Hashgacha to allow this. And the Baruch Hashem says, so be it. You see, so be it. What will happen is, I will take that light, and I will give it to you, and it will live in the darkness. The light of the Mashiach itself will live in the darkness, which is an amazing thing. That's why when Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the luchas, what did he do with it? Did he give it back to the Baruch Hashem? No, he broke it and threw it down on the earth. Because what he was saying is, these luchas are the Rosh Mashiach. You have lost it, but you have not lost it entirely. Because if I give it back to the Baruch Hashem, you have lost it. Because it means the light of Mashiach was back up. But I'm holding it. I convinced the Baruch Hashem to let me have it. I am taking it with me, but it is broken. It is shavur, it is broken. And he threw it back on the ground to show that the light of the Mashiach is not up there anymore. It now exists on earth, in the Torah that we have. But it is buried in like a seed. It's buried in a fruit. That's what exists now. Such a thing never existed before. Because either it was a beautiful, pure fruit itself, or it was no fruit. But to have a fruit with a seed inside, which is what? Inside was never conceived before. Or to have a nut, like a walnut, with a fruit inside of the walnut, never existed before. Either the Torah was what? There was no walnut, or the entire walnut was the nut itself. There were no shells. There was no such thing as a shell. Can you imagine walnuts or peanut nuts that grow without shells? That's what the Torah really is. Either there are no nuts, peanuts, or whatever it is, you see, or you have it without shells. But to have a peanut, or to have a walnut with a shell around it, is a new concept. This was the result of the freedom of Moshe Rabbeinu. He convinced Moshe to put the walnut in a shell. The walnut in the shell is called the Torah, B'tzuras, in the form HaChochma. It is in the form of what's called Chochma, where it no longer is possible to see what? The true existence of God, but it is possible to analyze it and to come further and further to a truth. It is possible. Through analytical processes, to understand it as deeply as possible, but it is not the truth that can serve. Oh, Torah, I missed the race there. Torah! But that's the thing. The concept of a Torah B'tuzat Chochmah was a new concept that where the Baruch Shem to do it had to alter the Hashgachas itself to allow the old Mashiach to exist in a total sleeper like that. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he was only Zoch in the end to Torah B'tuzat Chochmah, and he never got to the ultimate light. He never did. But that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is still considered the Mashiach. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was the Mashiach ben Yosef. Because what's the function of Mashiach ben Yosef? Didn't we say that the function of Mashiach ben Yosef is the Matar the Zayma? But didn't we also say that the greatest form of the Doma lies in the light of the Shekhinah? So when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to take down the Torah and to bring it down in its pristine form without the filter, he is the Mashiach ben Yosef. He was doing the highest job. He was doing the job of Mashiach ben Yosef. That's what a Mashiach ben Yosef does. He brings down the true light. And when Klal Yisrael sinned and the Baruch Shem wanted to take it away, he convinced the Baruch Shem to keep that light in a shell, so that it makes our job to break the shell. But once we break the shell, the nut is ours. We don't have to get it to the Baruch Shem, so to speak, again. It is ours. But the fact that Moshe succeeded in that means that Moshe Rabbeinu remained a Mashiach in that sense. And that's why in the ultimate goal, in the last redemption, when the Mashiach arrives, he will also appear. And he will instruct the Mashiachim in many ways on how to do their own job. You see. He is part of the last redemption. Why? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu simply be part of the first redemption and he failed? Just like the Jews failed, Moshe failed. But since Moshe succeeded, he succeeded to bring down a semi-messianic light. Okay, it's a nut in the shell. But it's still a nut, it's an edible thing. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu retains the Madrega of Mashiach. At least in that form, either made it or didn't make it. And since we don't have a Messianic period, no Mashiach ben Yosef made it. But Moshe Rabbeinu made it halfway. You see. The question is being asked, the famous medrash here, that by Matan Torah, the Baruch Shem went around to all the nations of the world to ask them if they want Torah, and they all turned it down. Esav didn't want it because he was into Metzicha, the homicide. Yishmael didn't want it because he was into Arias, into sexuality. Different nations were into different things. Yishmael didn't want it because he was into Geneva. So the question, different nations turned it down because they could not keep one of the specific commandments. The question is, what did the Baruch Shem do? Did the Baruch Shem go around and actually talk to the different nations, and who did he talk to? No, it's all a metaphor. What the Baruch Shem really did was spiritually access the various different nations, and he looked into the neshama, and he saw which Yitzhak they were preoccupied with. And in essence, when it means he asked them, he didn't actually ask them, but he looked into the neshama and he saw whether or not they were capable of going against that Yitzhak. So in essence, what he did was he looked into the collective neshama of Esav, you see, and he said, can you deal with your Yitzhak Ritzicha? And he looked in and he saw you can't. You will not want to deal with that. You will want to be a Ritziach. So he saw that Esav would refuse to give up its Yitzhak Ritzicha. You see. So he said, okay, and then he went on to the next nation. What it means, it was a analysis internally in the ruchnius of each of the collective neshama of each nation, you see. And he saw from the essence of the neshama itself whether or not it would want to give up its preoccupation. You see. The Baruch Shem saw that Esav was so preoccupied with homicide, with Ritzicha, that it would refuse to deal with a mitzvah of Lo Yitzirtzach. That's so the Medrash records that kind of what? Activity as a conversation. But it wasn't a real conversation, in a real sense. Now let's just investigate it further. We say, therefore, that Moshe Rabbeinu had the light of the Mashiach, and he was able to hold it on earth in a certain form. Fine. But the fact of the matter is, what is the difference between the light that Moshe Rabbeinu will have brought down and the ultimate light that the Mashiach will bring down in the end of time? In a certain sense, which is the greater light? And what I say is that the greater light is the light of the Mashiach in the end of time. Why? Because there's a certain deficiency in the style that Moshe Rabbeinu dealt with versus the last style of Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. How is that? The first generation, before the first Beis HaMikdash, as we once said, was a generation of direct access. They had a very powerful, direct connection with spirituality. They had prophets, they had Nevuah, right? They had Avodah Zarah, they had Kishuf, they had all these things that directly related to Ruchnius. Theirs was a generation of Nevuah, prophecy. Now the Mashiach at the end will not be keyed into prophecy. The Mashiach at the end will be keyed into what's called Chokhmah. You see, what's the difference between Nevuah and Chokhmah? Nevuah, which is prophecy, is the ability to know information through super logical prophecies. The information that he knows is beyond logic. It has nothing to do with logic or analysis or intellectual reasoning. Simply, suddenly, an idea or an image is planted into his mind, and that's the emes. And he knows that's the emes. So Nevuah is like watching a movie, so to speak, and seeing the entire emes in front of him. Chokhmah is deriving the emes by going through one thing at a time, comparing constantly what the difference is, what the similarity is, and slowly getting to the root of something. Which is the superior process, in essence? The superior process is really Chokhmah. That's why the Gemara says, Chokham Adus Minavi. A Chokham is greater than a Navi. Because the ability or the understanding, the truth of a Chokham is greater than than the wisdom of a Navi. Why is that? Why is that? Well, let's analyze this for a second. The Jews who lived in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, they went out of Egypt. What did they see? They saw Nisim. They saw miracles. The Mashiach at the end of time, will he do miracles? Not really. He will, but the miracles that he will do is not what's going to convince the world. What convinced the world, or Egypt at that time, of the power of the Bonisham was the Nisim, was the miracles. The 10 plagues in Egypt, the Yam Suf, the splitting of the sea, and so on and so forth. That's what convinced them. But what would convince the Goyim, or the people to the world at the end of time, is not open miracles. You see, it is Chokhmah. It is wisdom. Why is it that the Mashiach at the end of time will convince the world and Moshe was unable to? Because the truth is a miracle is inferior to a proven fact. Because what is a miracle? A miracle is more spectacular. But what is a miracle? A miracle suddenly, for example, reality goes on in a certain course. Suddenly something changes. Water normally goes horizontally. Suddenly it stands up in front of you as a column. Incredible. All the Jews go through, great. And then suddenly goes back. And somehow after it goes back, the memory is dimmed a little bit. Did it really happen that way and so on? In other words, when a miracle occurs, while the miracle occurs, we see the hand of God. But after the miracle is over, it's back to normal. And we question whether or not that really ever happened, and all new kinds of doubts begin to enter the picture, really. So that the power of a Nes exists. The power of a Nes to reveal the presence of God only exists at its moment. That's when it really is alive. But after the miracle is gone, the natural law comes back. And when natural law comes back, we really begin to feel. You see, was natural law ever really superseded? Or whatever the story is. That's the power of a Nes. Because a Nes is sensory. It deals with what you see and what you experience in that way. But a Nes is only temporary. And since it's temporary, its power rests only at that moment in time. It's like a magic trick. You could say, maybe it was a trick or something like that. Maybe it was an illusion. Maybe it never happened. Or maybe it happened a different way. But when the Mashiach comes at the end of time, he won't use any nisim. He will use wisdom, which means that he will prove with absolute truth that the Bonishim exists. So that what happens is that he won't need put it this way. In order to prove the existence of God through a miracle, we have to suspend the laws of reality. But God exists in the suspension of reality. But in the normal course of reality, God doesn't exist. For the miracle worker, he proves that God exists when reality is suspended, you see. But when reality goes back to normal, nature again, natural law hides God. But the Chokham, the Mashiach in the end, through Chokhmah, will prove that God exists through reality itself. He will show that natural law is the greatest miracle. He will show conclusively that natural law is exactly from the hand of God. He will show that the hand of God is natural law. not the suspension of natural law. Hence, once he does that, we can never go back to a disbelief in God. Because why? Because we can never go back to natural law again in its normal way. What the Mashiach does at the end with his Chokhmah is destroy the mask of the Satan for once and for all. Because he shows that the mask itself is God. The mask is God. So therefore, when we look at the mask of the Satan, we will always see the Bnei Shalom. So therefore, there is no more Satan. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu didn't take off the mask, or rather, he didn't show that the mask was God. He simply took off the mask temporarily and put it back on. So when you take off the mask, you see the Bnei Shalom, but when the mask is on again, you don't see God anymore. So to keep the mask or to take it off is an inferior way. The greatest way of destroying the power of the mask is not to take it off, but to show that the mask is no mask, even when it is on. And that is the power of the ultimate Mashiach, through Chokhmah. Through the intellectual understanding and the wisdom that he'll have, he will show that natural law is the will of God, with an absolute certainty. So he doesn't need miracles. He doesn't need the power of prophecy. In a certain way, it's inferior. It sounds amazing. We in our darkness would love to see a miracle. But the truth of the matter is, we in our darkness need truth, not miracles. Because miracles won't do it. And that's the ultimate power of Mashiach. That's why there's a double play on the last pasuk, one of the last pasuk in the Torah, in the Torah, where it says, there has never arisen a prophet in Israel like Moshe. That's what it says. It says that no prophet has ever arisen in Klal Yisrael like Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning that Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest prophet who will ever live. You see. Now, is that true? Is Moshe Rabbeinu a greater prophet than the Mashiach? Yes, it is true. But is Moshe Rabbeinu a greater Chacham than the Mashiach? No. The Mashiach is greater than Moshe Rabbeinu Chokhmah. The Mashiach is greater than the Malach HaShoretz in Chokhmah. You see. So then the question is, then what is the greatest of prophecy? The truth of the matter is, the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet who ever lived, because Moshe Rabbeinu lived at the time of the first redemption. And the first redemption was supposed to come through Nevuah and through Nisim, which is the principles of direct access. Since the Jews at that time were people who can access spirituality directly, Moshe Rabbeinu therefore was supposed to bring the redemption through direct access prophecies. And that process is prophecy and miracles, open miracles. But the fact is that that's an inferior mode, in a way. So that the Mashiach who lives at the end doesn't need Nevuah in that superlative degree. The Mashiach will have a far greater weapon. And therefore, he will bring the Gula in the process of the indirect mode. But the indirect mode, in certain ways, even though Klal Yisrael is on a lower level from a certain standpoint, but in a certain standpoint, the instrument is on a higher level. You see. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest prophet of all time. Not only because he's the greatest prophet of all time, but there's no need for another prophet as Moshe Rabbeinu. Because once Moshe Rabbeinu failed to bring the redemption through Nevuah, the next step must be through Chokhmah. Therefore, there's no other Navi that can come after Moshe Rabbeinu who will be greater. Because there's no need to be greater. You see, so that's the fact. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet is a positive compliment to Moshe. It shows the exalted status. It does. But in a deeper sense, it also shows in a certain way it also shows a limitation. Because to be the greatest prophet of all time means that you are supposed to bring the Gula through the mode of direct access, not through the mode of indirect access or the mode of Chokhmah. So therefore, by saying that you are the greatest prophet of all time, it's to say not only that you are the greatest prophet among other prophets, but it's also to limit you in the way you will bring a Gula, so that you will not be as great as the Mashiach in the next time, who will bring it through Chokhmah, and doesn't have to be the greatest prophet of all time. Do we see what it's saying? That's the difference in the Gulas. And that's why the last Gula is greater than the first Gula, because the last Gula will convince everybody, whereas the first Gula only convinced the Jews. Really. And like I say, it has to do with the mode. The mode of the first Gula is Nevuah, direct access, Nisim, miracles. The mode of the last Gula is Chokhmah, wisdom. And that's the highest. And that's why it says the perfect. Hine Yaskel Avdi v'nosa v'yom v'gov mi'od. For all my servant has become wise. He has become wise. And v'nosa, he will, meaning the Mashiach, will raise himself. V'gov V'yom v'nosa v'gov mi'od. The Mashiach will lift himself up on 3 different levels, and on each of the levels, he will become great in Chokhmah. Then Avram Avinu, he will be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu, and he will be greater than the Malach HaShoros itself in his Chokhmah. And that's his weapon. And where does he get that weapon? He gets it from the Or of Mashiach, you see. Or the Torah B'tuz HaKeser, which is the highest light in the highest mode of Chokhmah. Can anyone defy an individual with that kind of power? Could you begin to see what's involved here? This is no mere mortal you're talking about, although he is a mortal. But this is no mere weapon that we're dealing with. This is a power of absolute truth. The Yetzer Hara can survive miracles. The Yetzer Hara can survive prophecy. He can. That's why the Yetzer Hara says, you want to be a prophet? Be a prophet. You want to bring miracles in the world? Bring miracles in the world. Fine. The Yetzer Hara can survive it. But the Yetzer Hara cannot survive Chokhmah, Emes. That destroys them. Because what happens is, in order for Yetzer Hara to survive, he needs the power of the body. He needs the illusion of the physical world. The illusion of natural law. If you wanted to spend that for a while, have a good time. But so he'll take a vacation while you suspended it. He'll take a break. You see. But he knows in the end, natural law will come back. And when it comes back, the mask is here again. But the Yetzer Hara cannot survive the removal, cannot survive the disappearance of the mask, so that the mask itself becomes what? The evidence for the Baruch Shem. The Yetzer Hara cannot survive the mask becoming completely transparent, so that a person suddenly sees that there is no mask while he was wearing the mask. Then the Yetzer Hara has nowhere to hide anymore, because the mask is gone. It's over, and the Yetzer Hara therefore becomes bottled or annihilated. That's why the ultimate Mashiach has the power, such an enormous power. It's not only the power, and understand it, it's not the power simply to go against the nations of the world. It's not the power to go to China, you see, or Russia, and convince Gorbachev that the Baruch Shem exists. That's not what it's not the power to go to the Tibetans and show them that there's a Baruch Shem in the world, or the Indians, or to go to Reagan or the Pope and show them that they're absolutely wrong. That's not the power. That's a childish power, although that is awesome. The Mashiach don't deal with that. That's not the critical point. The Mashiach will have the power to go straight to the Yetzer Hara himself, who is the power behind all the Choshech illusions, and they have the power to dismiss him. The Mashiach will have the power to dismiss the filth of the Zoma covering the Shekhinah, and the Mashiach will have the power to dismiss the filth covering the Nachash. Forget about all these other people. The power of the Goyim lies in the power of the Satan. That's where they take the power. That's why it says in the message that what happens is that when the Satan saw the light of Mashiach, he trembled. Not only he trembled, but the Malachim who were in charge of every nation of the world trembled also. All the Malachim who were in charge, overseers of the Goyim, also trembled. Because they realized the incredible loss that they were about to sustain with that light. Because nobody can survive. So what the Mashiach do, they have a weapon against the heart of the Tumah and the heart of the Nachash. It is the Nachash who dies. It is the Zoma of the Nachash who dies. Kill the Zoma and you destroyed communism. Kill the Zoma and automatically Christianity fades in the distance. Kill the Nachash and there is no more Yetzer Hara. It's all gone. You don't have to go to the nations of the world themselves. That's where the battle really is. The battle is in the internal processes of creation itself. And the light of Mashiach, number 358, combats the Nachash, number 358, at the root of creation itself. That's why the powers of the Mashiach are so awesome. I think from here that we begin to have some idea of what this power is. But I will tell you very frankly, we have only begun to investigate that power. This is the first aspect of it.